A question for incels. What if the man you hate doesn't actually exist? See, there's a figure in the corners of the internet who's blamed for everything. It's the reason that you got rejected. It's the reason you feel invisible. The reason that you believe no woman will ever look at you twice. And his name is Chad. And in the language of incel culture, Chad is a god amongst men. He's tall, he's handsome, he's confident, he's sexually successful, and he never has to try. Chad doesn't have to work on his personality or build emotional intelligence or even earn his way into connection. Chad just gets it automatically, effortlessly, always. But here's the catch. Chad is just a fantasy. He's a story, an avatar, a symbol of everything you wish you were and everything you believe you'll never be. In this episode of The Bridge Back to Us, where we're not just talking about memes or message boards, we're talking about the emotional power of a myth. Because when a myth takes root in your soul, when you believe that someone out there has everything that you don't, it warps how you see yourself and how you relate to the world around you. So let's talk about where the Chad archetype came from and how it took hold and why it's not helping anyone, least of all the men who feel the most haunted by it. Because until we confront the myth, we're going to keep measuring ourselves against a shadow. And the only way back to our dignity is through the truth. So let's go back. Long before Reddit and the 4chan and TikTok memes, where we've had the versions of Chad in our culture. He's the high school quarterback. He's the prom king, the guy with the jawline and the swagger and the girl on his arm. He shows up in movies and in commercials, in music videos as well. He's usually white, right? And he's often muscular. He's always admired, and if you don't like him, or if you don't move through the world like him, well, you learn early on that you're not that guy. So the pain starts there, quietly. You begin to internalize that there's this hierarchy, and you're not at the top. And you feel it in the classrooms, in the locker rooms, at parties, on the dating apps. You begin to believe that unless you have what Chad has, you don't matter. You don't count. And slowly over time, that comparison begins to feel like a cage. And what makes Chad so powerful isn't that he's real. It's that he represents what you're told that you're missing. And in the absence of affirmation, it's easy to believe that Chad is your enemy. But here's what we don't talk about. Even Chad is a prisoner to the myth. The men who seem to have it all often carry burdens that you'll never see. There's performance, there's pressure, there's emotional isolation, the fear that their worth is only skin deep, only temporary, only as good as their last conquest. The truth is, the Chad myth doesn't really elevate anyone. Instead, it flattens everyone. It reduces men to caricatures, either winners or losers, the desired or the discarded, the alpha or the invisible. And when your whole sense of self-worth is built on not being him or desperately trying to become him, you lose yourself either way. So how did we get here? Why does this archetype have such a tight grip on the online male imagination? You see, part of the answer lies in rejection. Every time someone gets ignored or mocked or passed over, especially by someone they hoped would see them, it leaves a bruise, and those bruises begin to build. Over time, these bruises harden into a worldview, and that worldview says it's not just that I'm unwanted, it's that someone else always gets what I never will. And then you enter Chad, the perfect scapegoat, the living, breathing reminder of your unworthiness. But again, Chad does not exist. Not really. He's stitched together from fragments of envy, fantasy, and pop culture, from exaggeration. And here's the dangerous part. The more we give him in space in our minds, the more power we give in our minds, the less power that we feel in our own lives. And when you tell yourself that you can never be happy because you're not Chad, you hand over your agency to a ghost. You stop seeing your own humanity, and you stop honoring your own growth. In essence, you forget that intimacy isn't about being most desired, it's about being truly known at the heart of it. See, the Chad myth teaches men that connection is a competition, that love is a prize that you win by having the right face, the right muscles, the right voice. But that's not love. That's performance, and it's exhausting. So let's stop there for a second. How much of your life has been shaped by trying to win a game that you never agreed to play? How much of your self-worth has been held hostage by comparisons to someone who isn't even real? See, this episode isn't about minimizing your pain. It's about naming what's been hijacking it. Because when we can actually name the myth, we can start to unlearn those patterns. And when we unlearn it, we in essence create space for a more honest kind of masculinity. One that's not about domination, but about dignity. One that's not about being built on a better than model, but on being wholly yourself. And that is the kind of man that the world actually needs. So let's keep going. The Chad myth didn't arise in a vacuum. It's the byproduct, if you will, of a culture that's obsessed with status and spectacles. A culture that constantly tells men, you are what you can prove. Prove your strengths, prove your dominance, prove your desirability, right? And if you can't prove it, if you can't show the evidence in women, in wealth, or even attention, well then you're a failure at being a man. This is where the myth turns toxic. Because now it's just about envy. It's more about shame. It's not just Chad has what I don't have, but it becomes I'm not even a human because I don't have what Chad has. That's a brutal place to live. And far too many men are living there. This internalized shame creates a split. On the one side is a fantasy self, the version of you that should exist, the confident, charismatic, sexually successful man who just glides through life with ease. And then on the other side is your actual self, the self that is awkward and unsure and most likely invisible. When those two selves clash, the result is often self-hatred. But instead of recognizing the system that built the lie, it's easier and more tempting to direct that hatred outward toward the men who seem to embody what you lack, toward the men who you think only want those men, toward a world that seems stacked against you in almost every way. This is how resentment metastasizes. This is how a community that began around a shared pain can devolve into a culture of blame. And it all starts with a myth that was never questioned. So let's pause here and let's tell the truth. No one escapes comparison culture untouched. Not even the guys that you think are winning. In fact, the men who are idolized as Chads often report extreme pressure to maintain an image, to perform confidence even when they're depressed, to live up to sexual expectations even when they're emotionally unwell, to constantly prove their manhood in ways that leaves them disconnected and numb. Because if you're only valued for being a Chad, then the second that you slip, you in essence become worthless. And that's not strength. That's a trap. So what do we do with this? Like, how do we unhook ourselves from the lie that worth comes from winning and only winning? Well, first we need to humanize. We need to humanize the men we envy and the men that we hate. So what if Chad isn't your rival, but instead he's your mirror? What if he's another man who's trapped in a different part of the same system that you are? A system that tells all of us that we're only as good as our status, that intimacy must be earned through perfection, that masculinity is only valid when it's dominant. If we keep believing that, we in essence stay at war. We stay at war with ourselves and with each other. When we start to see one another not as competition, but as companions in a shared struggle, something begins to shift. And this is where integrity comes in. You see, integrity means aligning with the truth of, especially the truth of who you are, not who you're supposed to be. It means you're refusing to contort yourself into someone else's fantasy, and instead you're choosing to live from the core of who you are. And it also means refusing to scapegoat others just because you've been hurt. And this takes integrity to say something like, I've been wounded, I've been overlooked, and I refuse to pass that pain on to someone else. Because here's the truth. Chad did not wound you. It was the culture that did. The culture that taught you that your value had to be earned. The culture that never gave you the tools to be emotionally seen. The culture that fed you stories of dominance instead of teaching you how to love and how to be loved. See, we need to grieve that. We need to name the loss of what we were never taught. Because when you name it, you stop blaming yourself. And when you stop blaming yourself, you don't need an enemy anymore. You can begin to heal. You can begin to connect. And you can begin to rebuild a life rooted in, not in fantasy, but in being present in this moment. And that's where intimacy comes in and begins. Not with perfection, but with presence, by being in this moment. Not with being wanted by everyone, but by being known by someone. And the irony is this: the more that you root yourself in that kind of reality, the less you care about being a Chad. Because you're no longer living for performance. You're instead living for connection. You're not chasing status anymore. No, now you're building substance in your life. You're not trying to impress. You're instead trying to relate. And that is the beginning of becoming whole. So lean in just a little further with me on this one here now, because by now you might be wondering, if the Chad myth is so harmful, why is it so sticky? Why do so many people cling to it even when they know it's hurting them? It's because the myth offers clarity in a world that feels so chaotic. It's easier to believe in a simple story that Chad always wins and I always lose, and it gives you someone to then blame. It gives you a reason for your pain, and it gives your suffering some sort of a shape. It, in essence, organizes your confusion into a hierarchy that explains why things feel so unfair in your experience. But here's the problem. When clarity is built on a lie, it isn't clarity at all. It's in essence, it's a distortion. And the more we rely on the Chad narrative to make sense of our own worth, and the more we feed a system that profits off of our insecurity, the more lost we feel. I mean, think about it. Entire industries are built around selling men the tools to beat the Chads, right? You've got your supplements, you've got your pickup artists and their courses, you've got gym memberships, you've got high status clothing, you've got the beard oils that are popular now, the voice deepening exercises, the facial restructuring guides of how you can look better with a jawline, all to get you closer to this fantasy that was never real to begin with. This isn't to say self-improvement is bad. It's not, but self-improvement was born not from self-hatred, because that will bring you nothing close to peace. And you can't hate yourself into this idea of wholeness. When you build your transformation on the belief that you are inherently less, no amount of muscles or grooming or swagger will fill that hole. It's not your exterior that's lacking. It's your relationship to your own interior that's been neglected this whole time. So here's where the real revolution is at. It's reclaiming your interior world, reclaiming your right to be enough as you are, even as you're still in a process of growth, like we all are. Reclaiming your ability to connect, not through domination or envy, but through truth. And that's where we come back to intimacy. Intimacy, again, I define as intimacy. Intimacy is intimacy, and that's where intimacy invites. Because if you've been taught that being seen means being judged, it's no wonder that you're going to fear it. Of course, you're going to try to protect yourself with cynicism or anger or even silence. But here's what I want you to hear. Your worth, my dear listener, is not found in comparison. It's found in congruence. That means who you are on the inside matches up with how you show up on the outside. It means living with integrity, speaking what's true and feeling what you feel, refusing to mask yourself in order to win someone else's approval. It means realizing that the more authentic you becomes more magnetic. And it's because real connection is built on reality and not an illusion. And here's the twist that breaks the myth entirely. Even the people you think only want chads, many of them are actually starving for realness too. They've been conditioned by the same system. They've been taught to value image over substance. They've been taught to seek safety and status instead of vulnerability. They've been taught to chase fantasies over flesh and blood humanity. And they're tired, just like you. They're disillusioned, just like you might be. They want to be known in many ways the same way you do. So what would happen if instead of trying to become a fantasy, you became the one who invites reality into your life? What would happen if you stopped trying to out-chad the chads, if you will, and instead built a life that was grounded in truth, in tenderness, and in transformation? This is not weakness. This is not giving up. This is actually the most courageous thing a man can do in a world that's obsessed with spectacle. To choose substance, to choose presence over performing, to choose healing over hiding, and to choose becoming over comparing. You see, that's how we break the spell. That's how we dismantle this myth of Chad, not by hating it, but by outgrowing it, by becoming so rooted in integrity and in intimacy that the myth loses its grip altogether. Because the moment that you realize that you were never meant to be a Chad, then you're finally free to be yourself. And that man is worthy of love, worthy of connection and respect, not because he wins a competition, but because he shows up in truth. That man does not need to be envied. That man, instead, he just needs to be seen. So let's bring this home. You see, the deeper tragedy of Chad myth is that it distracts us from actual questions that matter. I mean, what does it mean to be a man worth knowing? Not a man worth envying, but a man worth knowing. Not a man worth fearing, not a man worth objectifying, but a man who is truly, in every essence, worthwhile knowing, who's attractive that way. Because underneath all the posturing and all the myths, and underneath all those comparisons, what we're really longing for isn't just to be desired. We're actually longing to be known, to be understood, and to be chosen for who we are and not what we're symbolizing. But if we keep worshiping the Chad archetype, we're in essence teaching ourselves to keep hiding and to keep performing and to keep armoring up and covering over the real self, to keep chasing approval instead of offering presence. And so we stay lonely, even when we're surrounded by people, because no one actually knows who we are. They only know the version that we're pretending to be. So let me say this as clearly as I can. The world does not need more Chads. It needs more of you. The you that's been buried underneath the shame. The you that's been hiding behind anger. The you especially that wants to be loved and be loved in a way that doesn't have to fear risk. See, the you that you are is not less than. That you is not broken. That you is in essence the starting point for something beautiful and something sacred. And it begins when you stop letting someone else's fantasy define your identity. You are not here to mimic a myth. You are here to live a story that is entirely your own, that's real, that's true, a story that's built on truth. And it's shaped by healing. A story that's filled with integrity. A story that makes room for intimacy. Because when you let yourself be seen, not as a copy of someone else, but as the most honest version of yourself, you're giving others permission to do the same as well. And that's how change happens. Not just in you, but around you. You, in essence, become this quiet revolution, a walking permission slip, if you will, a living reminder that masculinity doesn't have to mean dominance. It can mean depth as well. It can mean softness. And it can mean strength. Strength that's expressed through honesty instead of armor. The myth of Chad wants to shrink you into a template. But you, my dear listener, were never made to be a template. You were made to be whole. Not perfect, but whole. And wholeness comes when you stop comparing and when you start connecting. So here's my invitation to you. Let that myth die. Let that myth die, but not with bitterness, but with compassion. Not with hatred, but with honesty. Not with resentment, but with reclamation. I want you to reclaim your story. I want you to reclaim your sense of worth. My dear listener, I want you to reclaim your right to be a man that's not defined by a fantasy, but by truth. Because that kind of a man, that man is real. And the world is longing and aching for him. Thanks for listening.